Magellan's Thrift Shop. Good evening. My name is Dallin Decker. Tonight, we follow Damon on his journey through Magellan's antique thrift shop, where he uncovers a peculiar mystery contained within the dusty items on the shelves. Written by Satine Selva. Please lay down comfortably, close your eyes, and let your body melt into your warm, cozy bed. Now, take in a slow, deep breath, and then exhale gently, allowing any stress or anxiety you might be feeling to drift away. As we begin our story, I'd like to wish you a good night. It is a rainy afternoon, the kind of weather that makes you want to hide under the covers and watch as the fire swirls and dances in the snug fireplace, a warm cup of tea braced in your hands. And yet, Damon is walking down a once busy street, now emptied by the torrential rain, and that is when he sees it. He'd been looking for a gift, a present for his beloved girlfriend, and something about the two-story shadowed building with colorful yet pulsating dark tones in its walls called to him, as if whispers had been actually emanating his name. Damon walks to the store, Magellan's Magical Thrifts, with assuring steps, the rain not even bothering his skin as the promise of a good birthday gift loomed near, and with a clicking bell, he is inside. It's funny, as he looks around the store, something feels immediately off. Not bad, not worrying, but off. The shelves are packed with items like conches, crystal balls, flutes, weirdly shaped cards, not really what he had been expecting. And yet, Damon does not walk out, something about the place seeming incredibly right. He walks around a bit, inspecting the odd items and instruments of the apparently empty store, devoid of clerks or clients or even the background music that usually ticks him off completely, making him want to leave shopping malls as soon as he enters them. It's oddly peaceful, being there on his own, with nothing but his curiosity and the many things that he would come to familiarize himself with, and possibly take home for his girlfriend. A small chuckle bubbles out of Damon as he sees something nestled into the corner of a shelf, price tag on, in all its gray glory. A simple feather. Nothing out of the ordinary, which begs the question, why is a feather, of all things, for sale? Damon's fingers itch to touch it, curiosity piqued, and they move forward, and then he is somewhere completely different. He feels floaty, almost like he is flying with the wings of a tropical bird, feeling every inch of the arched wings, the feathers soaring through the cloudless sky. He can see with so much clarity now. It feels so real, he forgets, if only for a moment, where he is and what he is doing, or anything but the flap, flap, flap of the feathered extensions that replace his arms. But then, in a place that seems miles and miles away, and yet, right there, a hand is placed on his shoulder. The black-haired man jumps, his fingers retracting from the soft, gentle gray feather, and he turns around to face an old man with graying hair. He is well dressed, a warm blue cardigan that seems a bit too hot for the weather, but Damon mildly remembers hearing about older men feeling colder than other people. Khakis, pressed and sharp, leather shoes that are bright and well-treated, like an old friend for his feet. "Oh, hello." Damon's mouth corners into a friendly smile, the confusion of what had just happened just about settling in as he looks into the stranger's face. He is old, about 70 years old, he would guess, and he wears a red bandana over his white hair and a braid upon his graying beard. A stranger with a kind face and smiling eyes. "Be careful with the floating feathers, young man." The old man's voice is deep and wise, a vocal portrait of his face. Damon's eyes widened, realizing two very conflicting things. The first, that he hadn't been dreaming the whole flying event, that the smell of thin air rippling against his skin that wasn't quite his, that was real. And secondly, that it couldn't be. Could it? "What?" Damon takes the man's hand off his shoulder, aggravated by the revolution going on inside his head, and takes a step back that almost knocks some things out of the shelves and jumps in surprise at the sound his own boots make. "What is this place?" The old man smiles, a smile that is all welcoming and sweet as candy canes. He looks well-lived, content, proud to share the magic within these walls. "This is Magellan's magical Thrifts, and you, my friend, are certainly meant to be here." Meant to be here. That smile returns to the old man's face. Magellan's? "Well, everyone is meant to be somewhere, at some point, aren't they?" Damon's brows furrow, unsure if this is all some sort of confirmation of the impossible, or maybe if it's just a senile old man and a warning that he had not gotten enough sleep last night. He's unsure of both, and this man seems harmless enough. So the black-haired man simply straightened his posture, his face masking into a curiosity that is neither truly a mask, nor is it fooling Magellan in the least. "What is this place? I saw things." Damon's voice carries a wonder he did not quite mean to let out, his mind betraying him with a memory of gusts of air, thin veil-like clouds that went through his feathered body like sprays of water. He had to remind himself he was still standing on the ground. "Come with me." Magellan claps another hand on his shoulder, his lips in a gentle smile that never seemed to fade, so very kind. The two men walk into another aisle. Damon stiffened into a vertical pull, yet visibly, all childlike curiosity as he looks and looks, making a list in his head so he could remember where exactly he was. Ribbons, check. Horseshoe, check. Lamp, check. Now he was just more confused. They stop before a large conch. It's white and beautifully textured, if you like that sort of thing. Magellan gestures to it, sun-aged fingers just barely grazing the holes on the outside of the artifact. "Try this one, my boy." In doubt on whether to ask him what he even meant, or to just go with it, the stiffness of his back now more anticipation than mistrust, Damon mutters a quiet, "Okay," and reaches for the conch, fingers like velvet on concrete. And then, once again, he is somewhere else. He does not know how to explain it. His eyes are opened, yet what he sees is a beautiful open sky, white sand tickling toes that are very much bare, and the fresh smell of citrusy sea breeze. Damon gathers he could stand there forever, feeling the soft breeze, his body so real, and yet two places at the same time, something he could never explain. But then, a musical voice interrupts his thoughts, and he wonders for a moment if it's just confined to this magical world or if it really exists. "Damon, there you are!" He almost cannot believe his ears, or maybe it's his memory that's playing tricks on him. But as he turns around, there she is, his grandmother, with her soft gray hair and her round motherly figure and her arms spread wide, awaiting. He has not seen her in years, has missed the feeling of those arms around his skinny frame and the smell of lavender that lingered on her hair. Yet he doesn't understand how she can be here. "Grandma?" he utters, his feet carrying him forward involuntarily, and with each step he decides. It doesn't matter whether this is a dream or not. This is wonderfully realistic, and he has never had anything better. Damon sprints into a run, hugging the old woman with such force she has to brace herself not to fall over him, and tears sprint down the young man's face. They stay in that tight embrace for a while, shaking breaths, hidden only by their smiling faces and their arms spread wide across each other's backs. After a long moment, the old woman draws back, something so serene in her eyes as she pinches the young man's cheek adoringly and smiles again, brighter and brighter each time. "Grandma, how can you be here?" Damon finally asks. He has missed her since he was a small boy, 6 years old, and robbed of his biggest fan, and often thought of her when he watched the open ocean, like it used to be, staring out the window at her old house, pure, blue ocean. "I've missed you so much." "Oh, darling." An aged hand cups his cheek, wiping a traitorous tear away with another gentle smile. "I have always been here. I was just waiting for you to say goodbye." A calm settles over Damon's bones. A gentle happiness that knows that whether this is real or not, this is something he has never had. Peace. He cups her lined face, a smile that is both sad and very much happy gracing both their faces as he leans over and kisses her forehead, saying, "Goodbye, old-timer. Goodbye." He doesn't know whether his hand slips off the conch or if that daydream is just out of his mind, but the next moment he is standing in the musky thrift store again, the old man beside him wearing a telling, happy, sad expression. "Make her come back," Damon says, grabbing for the conch again, eyes pleading. But he knows deep inside that had been a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Magic, whether it had been real or just inside his head, and something he'd only relive inside of his noggin every time he stared into the vastness of the ocean. "I cannot," Magellan confirms, his voice kind and patient, "but I have many adventures to share, if you only dare embark on them." The old man seems to somber down then, as if some knowledge only he has access to has burdened him with a sadness all the too knowledgeable possess. He seems to ponder on his actions, and Damon wants to know more, wants to keep knowing more. So he says, "I believe now, whatever this is, This is magic." "You are not here by accident," the old man repeats himself with a kind smile, sighing with a slight nod of his head. "This shop only appears to those who need it most. You will not find a gift here, but this is a gift to you." Damon's brows furrow slightly as he tries to work Magellan's words out. He's not a dumb man, not in the slightest, but this is all so surreal, and it's hard to process on a sober mind. "I don't understand." The old man stared at him for a while, his ever-present smile fading for a slight moment. "Do you want to see why you were brought here?" Magellan finally says, eyes twinkling. "Can you embark on the adventure of your destiny?" Damon can only nod dumbfounded and follow the old man into another aisle, passing more and more random items that were beginning to seem less and less random by the second, and weirdly so. It was a feeling like something you get at the supermarket when you decide not to read instructions and go by type of food you're looking at, or when you're guessing people's ages. You never know why you're sure, but a sense of knowing fills you up regardless. And so his list grows. Pins, check. Chessboard, check. An old scratched Janis Joplin vinyl, check. It seems weird that this place of all would gather all this magic or whatever it was, and yet it felt right, like nothing else had ever meant more or been as perfect. It occurs to him that he has forgotten his reason for being here in the first place, that this quest for Beverly's birthday gift has been replaced for an insatiable hunger for a knowledge he never knew existed. But the part of him that cares has left the building, and he thirsts for more, more, more. Magellan stops in front of a wooden aisle. It feels heavier, both in energy and in physicality, and in its center, all round and clear and foggy purple, is a crystal ball. "This is where I leave you," the old man says. Damon can barely hear him. It's like a million tiny little voices are calling to him from 1,000 different places, and also the same place at the same time. It's overwhelming and wonderful and awful all at once. And he wonders how the old man lives with this feeling all the time, surrounded by these awe-inflicting objects all day, tempted to use them, and yet giving others the pleasure of doing so. He does not think himself that strong-willed. "Wait!" The young man claps a hand on Magellan's retreating frame, suddenly scared of what this all means. He's never been a religious man, never really thought about what destiny or fate meant, and he doesn't really feel like this means anything in that realm. Magic was something completely otherworldly, if anything. Yet this feels like something incredibly important. More important than him making his free-willed everyday choices, and he is so afraid of making the wrong one. What does it do? Magellan's smile grows. "I've shown you a glimpse of what used to be your past, but it's time to look forward, Mr. Cross. You have lived a shadowed life, always looking back. It's time to move forward." It's not an answer, not really. It's not a lie, though, and Damon knows it deep in his heart, and so he finds that he is speechless enough to let the old man go, unable to demand anything of someone who knows so much when he knows so little. As he looks upon the crystal ball, Damon thinks about that life, wonderfully broken, never quite filled to the brim. He'd lost his grandmother at the age of 6, his only caretaker, the one true love of his life. He remembered not understanding what it meant, death, until he realized he could never see her again. And then he'd been a disarray of jumping from foster home to foster home, getting into too much trouble for any parent to want him, money or not, never really treated badly. And he knew how worse things could have gotten. But he felt so cheated in his childhood. In his teens, he'd fallen madly in love with music, and then madly in love with a girl who had been nothing short of his muse. All that pain, all that suffering seemed to serve a purpose, even if it still felt like a cheated existence to live in such suffering. Beverly, his muse, his girlfriend, understood him so perfectly, and they made a promise not to ever give each other pain like that, even if it meant ending their love. And now, years later, they were so in love it blinded him. He thinks it blinded him to how much he was still lost in the world, how much he still didn't know about himself, and now, maybe he could understand it. Or maybe this just meant more questions. But the magic in this shop felt so warm and strangely familiar, something he knew he could not buy, could not gift to his girlfriend like he'd intended. But maybe it could help him find a peace he didn't even know he was looking for. A resolve settles over him, and Damon reaches forward, shoulders squared, breath ragged, and places both his hands on either side of the crystal ball, cradling it in his palms. It's not instant, not like the feather or the conch. It feels more like warm milk on Christmas night, like a blanket being thrown over him lovingly, snugly trapping him in a cocoon of warmth. And then he opens his eyes. He stands in a brown room. The walls are akin to wood, yet not quite. It's almost comforting, but not really. Almost like a warning that although he was not in danger, he should not make himself too comfortable. There are 3 doors in front of him. They look exactly the same, wooden, brown, and simple. The handles are pure silver, heavy and wide, and they seem to call to him, equally begging to be opened. Damon hesitates, wondering what this means. 3 doors, 3 choices? He's never been the best one with choices, especially without Beverly's help. But maybe that's the whole point. Life is all about choices, isn't it? And anyway, he is safe. He is still standing in a magical shop in the city somewhere, hands on a crystal ball. Breathing deep, Damon heads to the door in the middle. His hands tremble as he grasps the silver handle, so cold and alien to the touch, like magic. And as he turns it, as he opens that regular door in that regular hall's, light, pure light, bright and white, shines through. It blinds him with its intensity, and he wonders if this means he's made the right choice. Damon blinks and blinks and blinks. The light is overpowering, overwhelming. It takes over the room, if it is a room. But then it starts to clear, the whiteness giving way to something else, something incredibly familiar. He is home. He knows the room like the back of his hand. Guitars strung on the walls, knickknacks from places Beverly has traveled, all of them too close for you to bring home souvenirs, but no one was ever brave enough to take the smile off the girl's face as she looked for them, happy enough to be all of 15 miles away from home. Leather jackets and notebooks and paper plates all thrown about, but nothing about this feels messy to Damon. It just feels like home. Like them, like love. What he doesn't understand is why he is here, how he is here. And then he sees her. Beverly walks out the kitchen door with a plate on her hands, a band of silver on her fingers, and a smile gracing her thin lips. Her face seems older, wiser, lined and expressive in a way he had not expected, at least not for a few years. Somehow, this does not scare him. The thought of growing old with Beverly never did. Yet this feels like so much information. This feels like an invasion of her privacy, her future. He is in the future? Is this what the old man meant? This could be his final answer or his very downfall, and Damon isn't sure he is ready for either. He knows this is meant for him to see. Yet, he is still on that store, still grasping for this pseudo-reality. And yet this feels like a dream he does not feel entitled to. Is this what it's like to wander into the future? "Hey, you're home," the old Beverly says, settling down on the couch. Her eyes twinkle with a happiness he had only seen in them before, an air of femininity and serenity to them. "I missed you." Heh. Damon doesn't really know what to say, whether to go with it or get out of there, and takes a step back half involuntarily. Nothing about this feels forced or wrong or out of place. In fact, it feels sort of right. And yet, he feels as if he's cheating her by pretending he knows who she is all these years later. "Yeah, are you okay?" Beverly sets the plate down on a side table beside the couch, hands slightly crinkled by time, and gets up, walking up to him with careful sensibility. "The kids are at my parents'. I thought we could have a movie night, like old times." "Kids? Okay." Beverly's eyebrows furrow, and she cups Damon's face in a movement that is incredibly like the woman he knows and loves, incredibly sweet, incredibly her. He flinches slightly, but gulps silently, trying to calm down and just enjoy the moment. "Beverly, tell me something," he lets out. This isn't scary, he realizes. This is the future he's always wanted. It feels so overwhelming, but it's so very perfect. To live with the woman that made him fall in love with life again, to possibly have kids with her and still have dates and be so very in love. He wants this. He wants this so very much. It's frightening. "Are we in love?" Beverly laughs, a musical, lyrical laugh that seems to sing at the wind around her. "Of course we are, baby." She reaches over again, and this time he doesn't flinch away, doesn't back down. Their foreheads touch in the most innocent of touches, and she whispers, "What has brought this on?" "I'm just so happy," Damon says. It's an honest answer that comes from deep within his chest, and he realizes there is nothing else in the world he would rather have as his future. Beverly extends a hand. "Come on, you seem hungry." Hours fly by in a swirl of laughter and food and movies that Damon has never seen. Beverly is the same, yet so different. And it is the most wonderful feeling. She is like a mirror of everything he's ever wanted, so much like herself, and yet it's almost like she's learned everything about the way he ticks, the way he's chosen to love her. But he knows this is not the end of this adventure. It's too comforting, too happy. Nothing is ever this final. And there are still 2 doors waiting for him outside. But he doesn't want to leave, doesn't want to ruin this perception of perfection, not when it is everything he never knew he wanted, never knew he needed. Damon falls asleep to the old Beverly's soft breathing that night, and his dreams are filled with blonde children he has never met, faceless children that are his, yet not quite his. And he knows, as he wakes up, that it is time to go. Because as much as this time has been perfect, he must build it over time with his real partner. He walks out the door before his girlfriend, or, well, wife, can wake up and convince him to stay, closing it with a sadness that can only be filled with possibility. He will get here again. He has everything he needs in the real world. Maybe that is the real lesson here. You make your own destiny, whether you choose for it to be filled with pain or fight for a fate of happiness and friendship and love. It is almost like a weight lifts from his shoulders then. I am not doomed to suffer. Damon stares at the remaining 2 doors. The brown hallway seems so dark compared to the brightness of the room he'd just been moments before. It scares him a little. The anticipation of what might happen next. It's not fear, not really. More of a feeling that whatever loomed near couldn't ever be better than what he'd left behind. And he now wished he could just go back and let go of the crystal ball altogether. Could he? The effort to do so brings nothing but frustration, and he finds himself annoyed. This is a trap, isn't it? He does not do well with traps. He's lived in them all his life, an unwanted boy in a world that is ready to spit him out. But that does not explain the bright room, or Beverly. How this vision, this place, could have mimicked every inch of her perfect midnight-toned face as if it had been looking upon it for a lifetime. Damon's hand grasps for the second handle, and what follows is a calming, serene sort of darkness. No light, no color, just the shadows he'd been used to up until now, coming to lick his hand in gentle caress. Damon blinks, and the scene before him unfolds. It is the same house, the same guitars on the wall, but Beverly's knickknacks are gone. Her concert tickets to those awful American bands, her perfumes, her clothes, all gone. And in front of him stands himself, or rather sits, an old man scrolling through the internet, absent-mindedly eating potato chips and listening to old punk rock music like he is still in the 70s. Is this what the future holds for him? A future without his girlfriend, without kids, without friends, without anything? The notion makes a numb sort of feeling in his chest. In midst of these 2 futures, he does not know which to believe, the one he wants or the one he actually can see coming true. And yet, there is still one door to be opened, and it all seems like too much, like he shouldn't be allowed this information at all. Who is he to meddle in his own future? Who is he to pity himself? Taking a deep breath, Damon has another look around. Sheet music, drummer sticks, vinyl records, but none of the booze he thought he would see. He'd had this habit before Beverly, before he'd known that life could be good and worth living. He'd had a habit of numbing it with anything he could get his hands on, too scared to let go completely, yet too scared of committing to the beauty of the world, the chaos of the truly living. And yet, here was a version of him that was completely alone, and he could see nothing of the coward he'd been then. Damon walks toward the sheet music, laying on the floor, on the computer desk, on the couch, and inspects it closely. It's good, quite good. Something between the Ramones and the Police, and something completely new, completely him. And he wonders, does this mean that he has accomplished in his true love's absence all that he has ever wished for? To be musically endowed? The man in front of him continues to type on his computer, a laugh bubbling out of him, and he notices how happy he sounds, yet alone. Is this what it means to choose your path? To choose between what makes you, you, and what makes you happy? Because honestly, Damon does not know if he can make that choice. It had seemed so clear a second ago, and now it seems miles and miles away, foggy and tempting in all the wrong ways. The older Damon stands, a smile etched into his face, and places a record into the vinyl player, eyes shutting close as a smooth, black voice fills the air. A song about longing, loss, and love, something he seems to feel very deeply, but then again, doesn't every artist? It's not a sign, is it? Then clicking commences again, and Damon moves to see what his older self is typing, what fills this man's time, all alone in his apartment. It's funny. It seems like so far away when loneliness filled his days, when fighting for love was a constant battle, yet the way this life is shown to him, a lonely life that isn't miserable in the least, that is accomplished and true, even if it is accompanied only by the voices of Nina Simone and the Beatles, it seems so attainable. Damon doesn't understand why he is so pessimistic, whether it is circumstance or simply who he is as a person, but he wonders if that changed over time too. If these futures had any impact on the way he viewed the rest of the world, and if that, maybe, is what made him a better artist. The clicking of the older man's fingers upon the computer grabs hold of his attention once more, and Damon leans in to spy on his screen, the brightness seeming blinding in the darkness of the room. What greets him is something he never expected to see. His older self is idly scrolling through a website dedicated to his own music, to himself. However self-serving, he was taking the time to answer every comment, to share his thoughts with fans, he had fans, and make sure they were heard. There were millions of comments, little side notes on how they loved his music, things he had done so many times in his youth for bands he admired. Tears welled in his eyes. This was a dream. It was everything he'd ever wanted. But how could it be without Beverly? Why was the world filled with choices he could never make? He needed to get out of here and out of that shop for good, but there was still another door, another future locking him here, freezing him in place with the force of 1,000 mountains, because he could not bring himself to imagine what could possibly be so important it could compare to this, to Beverly's version of the future. What could possibly await him next? Damon stands there, lulled by the music and the darkness, by the dreams that feel slightly empty in the absence of love, trying to figure out how much he could stand of this before it was simply too much. The other man didn't seem to even see or notice him, but there was something in his eyes that made him feel like they weren't alone at all. A promise of company in the notes of the melody of the songs he adored so deeply, or perhaps just the sound of the train he used to hate. But thinking about this lonely apartment made him yearn for the people that boarded and left the busy lines of the trains each morning. When he was little, Damon used to dream of the city, in his grandmother's beautiful sunny house that opened to the sea. It just didn't feel like enough without the busy streets and skyscrapers. "Grandma, we've progressed for a reason." But now, the quiet sings to his heart. And it might be a sad song, but it is beautiful nonetheless. And he wishes this version of him didn't have to constantly fill that silence in this already incredibly loud city. And it dawns on him, he's always felt like sadness was so very overwhelming. To feel a little was to feel too much. And yet, these futures, all of them, have been so very happy. Even this one, this lonely version of himself that has to drown out the quiet. He is so incredibly lucky, and the reason he was so afraid to go on to the next door to explore what could be the next for him was fear. Pure, unaltered fear of whatever misery awaited him. He did not fool himself in thinking all the doors would bring him this joy. It was impossible, wasn't it, for someone to be always happy? Or did it just mean that you could always find happiness if you looked in the right places, if you looked closely enough? Damon decides he had to go through with this, had to go on. He did not know whether the physical plane could just fade from under him, but he didn't want to chance it, to chance any of these futures from ever happening. One thing was certain, and that was that this vision had shown him just how much love he had for this life, for Beverly, for himself. He takes one step towards the door, glimpsing once more to the dark room and the laughing older version of himself still clicking away at the computer, and then leaves, closing the heavy wooden thing with a finality of someone saying, "Perhaps in another life, but not for me." Standing in the brown, simple hallway again, it feels funny. Such a weirdly undecorated place to hold such precious knowledge, almost like the poster child of "Don't judge a book by its cover." Almost. Except Magellan had ruined it for him with visions of his grandmother and the flying adventures. Ruined, or perhaps just prepared. Either way, the funny feeling tells him he is not afraid of what he will see. Because if Magellan and his store and this whole vision have taught him one thing, it is that misery does not define us. It is simply a companion we must overcome. And if a miserable future was an option, it meant Beverly's was another. And the slightest chance of that was enough. It was breathtaking. He had never known he was so moved by love, but to himself, so alone, successful, but alone. He knew money didn't matter. It was her. It was people. And he would fight for it. He would do whatever it took. Damon takes a deep, steadying breath and reaches for the third door, and is very surprised when light greets him once more. The dim orange light, which he can see right as he opens the silver handle, a beautiful sunset breaking in a million colors over wide, sturdy mountains. He steps outside the door and absent-mindedly notices how it stands connected to nothing but the open air, magic in its true form. But his eyes are busy searching the horizon, trying to identify where he is, what this means. Maybe this is his burial, the place where his future ashes have been spread. He cannot see a single soul, but it seems pointless to show him a future he can have no say about, and this isn't somewhere he recognizes. So where is he? Damon sets on foot, walking over the hills to where the grass is greener and there are wild lilies all about. A bright blue bird flies by, and he doesn't know if he's ever seen anything this beautiful. The sun, now purple and red and orange, the flowers, the bird, it's wonderful. So wonderful, in fact, that he almost misses the tent settled atop the next hill. It's getting darker and darker, but Damon makes his way to the tent, determined. Each step is followed by more beauty, more green, more wild. The wilderness doesn't frighten him. It's almost like he feels at home here, like this silence, in contrast with the loud silence of the second-door city, is warm to the touch of his ears. He almost doesn't notice that he is smiling without knowing a single thing about what this future means to him, and then he is there beside the tent, and from behind it 2 voices come, familiar and masculine. "No way, Dad! That was a snake!" comes the first voice. It's a boy, 16, and he knows deep inside, as he looks into his dark hair and his clear blue eyes, that he is his son. His nose is so like Beverly's, and his mouth is a perfect match between them, and it makes him want to cry or laugh, or maybe both, because no one should ever be allowed to see something like this before its time. But he knows that whatever future this is, it's not misery that awaits him. It's something beautiful. "Whatever you say, champ," his older self laughs, and his face is lined by his happiness, though something else adorns the back of his eyes as well. The 2 men carry jagged branches Damon assumes they'd been gathering from the trees, and walk to the center on the small space they have upon the beautiful hilltop before throwing them haphazardly on the grass. His older self sets to pile them in a circle, a beautiful nature-oriented kind of organization. As night comes, the wind becomes colder, harsher. Yet Damon doesn't want to leave. Something about this version feels almost better than the rest. Peaceful. So beautiful and quiet. He watches as father and son flow around each other, movements like the waves on his grandma's beach, so familiar and safe, but still completely unpredictable. The fire is lit, and they roast a fish wide as his thigh, and laugh. It seems like laughter is their language. "I bet this is the biggest fish anyone's ever caught on this river," his son boasts, pecking on the fish before him with a small, distasteful turn of a lip of someone who doesn't really like it. It's a pretty prize, but not much of a meal. His older self seems to notice, his lip turning upward slightly as he answers, Now, Jonas, let's not get so proud that we don't enjoy a simple meal." Jonas snorts, taking in a mouthful, as if to prove a point. He doesn't seem to enjoy it much, swallowing it down in one simple gulp, and both Damons know it too. But the dad stays silent, a smile gracing his lips, warmth filling the otherwise cold atmosphere. But there is an expectation in the air, an unfulfilled promise, and he knows there's something missing in this picture. "You did good, Jonas. It is good fish." His older self gobbles down another bite, smiling wide. "Your mother would be proud." "Would? I wish I could remember her more, Dad. You never talk about her." His world freezes. There is always a catch, isn't there? The first door had shown him love beyond compare, the second had shown him all that money could buy, and his third is showing him beauty, the world itself. Yet for every perk, for every single thing that he has ever wanted, there is a reason he shouldn't want it in the first place. It's a heart-breaking motion, something he'd never wanted to think about, because honestly, choices are so hard, and he's never been good at making them. Maybe that's why he's here. But to choose a world where the future is so incredibly beautiful, and yet it means the death of the person he loves most in this world, it is too much. It is something he cannot accept. He feels like a monster for even considering it, for looking at the wilderness and forgetting that it is a possibility in any future, even if not at this volume, and Beverly would still be alive somewhere too. He knows that being alone is better than losing her so completely. And that makes his choice very clear. There was never much doubt at all, though, was there? His mind is reeling. He has learned so much, but his love is what has grown the most. He can picture himself getting home, staring into Beverly's real chocolate eyes, running his hands through her real smooth hair, and telling her that he will never leave her again because he has seen the future, and the only way he wants to spend it is by her side. Damon thinks he knows exactly what kind of present to give her, and he really hopes he can go home now, if only so the future can come to be. As the fire swirls and the two men talk and laugh in a way that seems too private for even his own ears, something for family, and he hasn't earned that right yet, hasn't earned the trust and love that a father and son craft through years and years of friendship, Damon retreats, retracing his steps to the last door. It's hard, finding his way in the dark. And the vision hasn't carried his cell phone along with him, go figure. But a sense of calmness settles over him as he stumbles through the darkness, blind. He has completed this challenge, and now he knows exactly what he must do. He is down and close to the door again a while later, and his hands reach forward, feeling for the hard, wooden surface blindly as he shuffles through the moonlit night. There are so many stars he can almost make out the shapes in the space around him, make out the beautiful flowers and the rocks and the grassy open fields, but his vision fails him, too human for the nocturnal hours of the wilderness, and he knows not of the experience that his older self seemed to emanate. Damon's hand grasps a handle, hard and cold against the windy night, the edges of the door apparent to his other hand, so jagged, firm against the nothingness it stands against, and as he opens, color, bright, unfiltered color. It is so undoubtedly magical, the way this passageway exists, connected to nothing but pure air, and yet leading him from past to future, from one place to another, from a life filled with love to a life filled with emptiness. He dives, doesn't let his eyes adjust to the light before he simply dives into the room, through the passageway, all his senses screaming, yelling, shouting, and then nothing. He is back where he started, at Magellan's magical Thrifts, grasping a crystal ball that has now turned completely clear, its color, its fog, completely drained. He draws his hands back, apprehensive, and carefully places them in his pocket, looking around the empty shop, wondering if this means he should leave, or if any explanation would be finally given on what this all means. Does being here means it is over? That he was chosen for some reason, chosen to receive this gift and live a life that is completely led by love, because now he knows what the alternative looks like? Or does it mean they require payment now? He does not think he could afford such a gift. "Ah, you've come back." Magellan's voice takes him out of his reverie, a smile apparent in each word. "I hope you enjoyed your adventure, young man." Damon is speechless. He does not know how to say it, that he could never repay this. It hadn't been enjoyable, not really. It's been truthful. And as an orphan of both death and circumstance, twice over, he has never had much truth in his life. So he simply says, "Thank you, Magellan." The old man smiles, a gentle, simple smile. "Is there anything else I can do for you, Mr. Cross?" Damon stands up straighter, widening his mouth into a bright, handsome smile. Just one thing. His thoughts are clear. He envisions that future, Beverly's midnight-toned face, the smile lines of her skin, the children they could have, will have, and he knows this is right. He will make it so. His smile grows as he asks, "Do you know where one could find a diamond ring in this city?" Magellan's laughter is soft, warm. It's as if Santa Claus had decided to come join the jolly fun one Christmas, and you told an especially funny joke, which, now that he thought it, was a funny notion in itself. They don't linger much, something about finishing the vision, making the moment, the whole moment, inside that magical place, very much over, and growing stale by the minute. He has enjoyed it so very much, but even good things come to an end. Unless you fight for them, unless they are more important than whatever comes next. Like Beverly, like his future with her, like knowing the world surrounded by love instead of money or beauty. And so his hand grasps one last magical handle, the coldness sending a jolt he does not know if it comes from electricity or magic itself, but cannot bring himself to care. His future seems bright, and that's all he knows, all he dares care about. Damon steps onto a regular street in a regular city, and it is the most beautiful thing he has ever seen. What a wonder to be just regular, to love a regular woman, to have a regular future with regular kids, because in the end, he is not regular. Nobody really is. Regular people are just magical beings that are vibrating on a different frequency than you. But the time he'd spent in that vision was too intense to live for too long in, and the frequency Damon normally vibrated in was just fine by him. The sun is bright up in the sky as he walks up the street, back the way he had come from, back from what seemed like weeks ago. And as he moves, smiling, hands in his pockets, as if nothing had ever happened, the young man doesn't even notice that the store he had come from disappears, never to be seen again.